Now, for those of you who don't know, Charlie is a big University of Tennessee fan. And
who's Charlie?
And Charlie Ergen. and when they beat Alabama a couple weeks ago, I don't know if that was almost as a great of success as building a company like Dish, but he
said it was the best sporting event he's ever been to, but I don't think it rivals what he's done at Dish.
Well, we're glad to be in your hometown, glad to be in Denver, and we're looking forward to hearing. You were with us last year as we were coming out of the pandemic. Charlie was with us, I believe in Louisville a few years ago, right before the pandemic.
Right.
A lot has changed. A lot is constantly changing. Dish is on the run, building a network on the run. Talk to us a little bit about the progress you've made from the last time we met and talked and discussed, and where you see going over the next year, 2, 3 years.
Okay. Well, it's a very ambitious project that we undertook, and we're making very good progress. We filed with the FCC. We had a requirement to cover 20% of the U.S. population by June 14th of this year. We filed all the the shape files and all the documentation with the commission. So we were now well in excess of 20% of the population. So we're laser focused on meeting those build-out requirements that we signed up for. For those of you who don't know, it was really kind of a remedy with the Department of Justice and with the FCC to address the Sprint T-Mobile merger. We were brought into that conversation, and at that time we agreed to these build-out requirements to be the fourth entrant into the U.S. market, operating on a national level. We embraced Open RAN from the beginning, which obviously is a pioneering effort in and of itself. We embraced cloud native, so all of the workloads are running in AWS, and we have diversified AWS instances throughout the country. So we're making good progress. Our next milestone is June 14th of next year. At that point, we have to have over 15,000 towers operational. Keep in mind, this is from a standing start. We're very focused on that, and right now we're, just about 10,000 towers, and we're adding about 1,000 a month. So we feel pretty good about where we're going, but you can't forecast the future. We always have issues in places like LA, San Francisco, New York, but we're making progress and feel pretty good.
We just had a conversation with the president of Zayo, who's one of Dish's strategic partners. Talk to us about all of your strategic partners, and I don't know if there are opportunities for other partnerships for some of our member companies, but you've put together a great team, which is critical to y'all's success, and I'd love to hear about all of your partners and how that's working.
Happy to. We've been very fortunate. A lot of people globally want to work on this project. It is the first of its kind, and so we've recruited successfully from all over the world and relocated many people to here in Littleton, Colorado. Our headquarters for the Dish and Sling businesses is down in the tech center, but for the wireless business, we have that headquartered in Littleton. We had to do this all through the pandemic. We didn't stay at home. We kept hiring. International travel was restricted, but that Littleton building has gone from 5 of us in May of 2020 to about 900 today. We've opened 34 regional offices around the country, all with, legal, RF, construction, big crews that can then fan out to meet all of our requirements. The vendor list is a long list. When you're embracing Open RAN, you essentially name yourself as the systems integrator, where in the old days, an Ericsson or Nokia would take care of everything end to end. But that was also the problem with that, is that they controlled you end to end, and you couldn't you couldn't plug and play different vendors or different solutions into your solution. So we have Amazon in the cloud. We're doing a lot of work with IBM, Dell, Cisco, VMware. On the transport side, we have over 30 transport vendors that we're working with. You mentioned Zayo. They've been very responsive. We're very demanding, because of our short time frames. Zayo's in our offices once a week. We need redundancy, and in many areas we're pushing harder for more redundancy. It's been a team effort. The vendors, as I mentioned last year, have been, very anxious because this is a new global vertical for them. If they can demonstrate, real-time telco workloads operating in the cloud, that's a big opportunity. And so the vendor list is growing as well, because you're not only doing the physical construction and the software, and on the software side, we're using primarily Mavenir and Samsung. That is the software for the RAN. But we also, had to create an entire IT stack to do, obviously we have experience in doing that for satellite customers and for Sling customers, but to do it in the wireless world required an entirely new stack for billing, customer service, provisioning, all the regulatory compliance. So we have a lot of moving pieces going at once, and that pace will continue for several more years, because after our next build-out requirement in June 14th of 23, then by June 14th of 25, we have to cover 75% of the population in each of the PEAs, the partial economic areas that define the license structures. So when you have to cover 75% in each of those areas, that means we're going to have to fan out and get even more transport vendors, for instance, to support many, there's 416 local areas that you got to build out. So it's, the lawyers have been busy.
So I'm just thinking, so 3 years from, as we celebrated 41 years this year INCOMPAS is 41 years old. We've lived through the decades of different technologies and competition. Now we're going into the convergence really of wired and wireless, of cloud, the new software capabilities that allow O-RAN, and a greenfield new network that really is transformational. And you're doing this on the run so that when we gather together 3 years from now, your network will be built and serving 70% of the American population. That's pretty hard to get your head around.
Yeah, from zero. Yeah, I didn't realize you were 41.
INCOMPAS, yes.
Yeah, I know. I started my career 41 years ago, about 3 blocks from here at Mountain Bell, and pre-divestiture, you could have never imagined what the world would look like today. And as the previous speaker said, 2 years from now, it's going to be completely different as everybody transforms digitally. So, it's an exciting time. I think what we're enabling is more than just, consumer-oriented benefits. We will, once we get, we're close to getting everything ironed out, and I know we have some other questions about the technology, but we'll be very disruptive on pricing at the consumer level, but then it opens up all sorts of opportunities in the enterprise and business space due to the architecture that we've deployed.
What does that look like for the business enterprise space?
It's very much top of the first inning right now, but we're doing some things in the mining industry with the Department of Defense, a lot of hospitality applications. But, for instance, one use case that we're working on is a military base that wanted to accelerate the time to turn around planes, and so when they land, they have to download an enormous amount of data, analyze that before they can turn the plane around to take off. And so by building out an all 5G infrastructure at the base, the plane is wirelessly downloading this massive amount of information as it's coming down onto the base. And so then with the compute power that is sitting there locally, they're able to do the analysis, complete their checklists and turn the plane around much faster. And so that's just an example, but there's in the logistics area, in the last mile delivery space, healthcare, there are so many opportunities to improve productivity, accelerate responsiveness, and it's all going to be based on the low latency, higher throughput enabled by 5G networks.
Your biggest challenges to reach your objective?
Well, time's not on our side. People literally, we are working 24/7. But we're making good progress. We're not complaining about it. We always spend a lot of time in DC. It's not to say that's a challenge, but there's a lot of work to be done on that front. I'd say currently the biggest challenge that we're facing is in every generation of wireless network, it's getting voice to work in that generation is a challenge. So the carriers, 6, 7, 8 years ago had difficulty getting VoLTE to work, which is voice over LTE. And then now, not only we, but other carriers globally are ironing out the challenges associated with VoNR, which is voice over new radio. In our case, we're different from everybody else because all other carriers, when they were making those transitions, they always had the previous generation to fall back on. But we consciously said, no, we're going all 5G. We don't want any legacy 4G. There's too much, legacy software support required as you move forward. So VoNR has been a challenge, but I'm feeling pretty good about the progress we've made with some software releases in the last couple weeks, and we'll be deploying that much more broadly in the next few weeks. So we're getting there on that front. We also, we've signed, as part of the agreement with the Department of Justice, we had a 7-year MVNO agreement to be able to utilize the T-Mobile network as a complement to our network. And in the interim, we've also signed now a 10-year agreement with AT&T, which opened the door to renegotiate with T-Mobile. So we're getting better rates, but we have the luxury now of being able to provision a customer onto our core network and have in-market roaming onto both AT&T and T-Mobile. So gives us flexibility as we continue to build out for coverage, but you still have very good dense coverage within each of the markets.
Those two agreements are strategically a big deal.
They are.
It should be, over the last year, 2 years, as we look at, Dish's ability to succeed, those are important milestones and important agreements and capacities that y'all been able to negotiate and reach.
Yeah, we're not quite where we want to be from a market entry standpoint. We have this project right now called Project Genesis, which is basically a nationwide beta test of our market on our network. But we only cover less than 30% of the population at this point. So any customer can go to the website and then they'll put in their address, and we have a serviceability database that will qualify whether our coverage is at that address. And there's just a limited number of devices, but it's helping us iron out the operational processes and improve the customer experience while we're preparing for a much broader launch in the first quarter.
Of next year?
Yeah.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, it's almost November 1st, so we're getting close.
So, one of the things, when you mentioned Washington, one thing that Encompass is very proud to help lead is a coalition and a campaign to bring the 12 gigahertz, 500 megahertz of unencumbered spectrum. And by unencumbered, that means there are no federal users, there's no FAA, there's no DOD. It really offers our country one of the greatest opportunities to have dual use both for satellite services and new terrestrial 5G services and fixed wireless services without the same type of encumbrances that every other band has.
Right.
And it is the biggest band out there in mid-band, which is the critical, most economic band of spectrum to deploy on. So as we look at international competitiveness, to being able to compete with China, being able to have deployments like dishes and others, so that we have greater competition for the country and broadband connectivity. It's a big proceeding at the FCC. Talk to everyone about why that's important to Dish's future and for the country's future.
Yeah, well, we have a long history with 12.2 to 12.7. We actually, because it's part of the DBS service, we use that for one-way service in the satellite business. But we also, I think it was 19 years ago, maybe 18, that we bought the terrestrial rights to that same spectrum, even though it's only authorized for one-way use, because we wanted to make sure we were protecting the satellite business. And to your point, it's unencumbered. And to us, there is a global race for 5G, and you want to be in a position where you're taking advantage of a global ecosystem. So for us as a country not to put to work 500 megahertz of spectrum at that frequency band, we think is an imperative to continue to win that race. And Dish and other owners of the spectrum have advocated for this change for quite a while. We've submitted exhaustive engineering studies, and we just think it's good public policy and it's time to act.
And we have a great panel following our conversation on 12 gigahertz and some really good panelists that will talk about where we are and the engineering and the science and the potential there.
Now, similarly, the CBRS band, when those rules were adopted, I don't know, 7 years ago or so, it was sitting kind of in isolation with, the frequency bands above that were occupied by the satellite providers, and the frequency bands below that were occupied by the Department of Defense. And since then, those have both been cleared and auctioned. And as those who follow the industry, you know that the C-band at the higher end went for $90 billion worth of in money to the Treasury. Yes. In exchange for getting that spectrum liberated. And similarly, the 345 to 355 below CBRS was also just auctioned, and we participated in that in a fairly large way. But the problem now is CBRS is lower power. And so the rest of the world is operating the entire C-band at high power. And if you go to Asia, you'll see C-band deployed all over Korea and Japan and other areas, and we think that should be revisited by the commission, that to look at raising the power of CBRS in the middle of the band, because again, you're not taking advantage of a global ecosystem. And from a capital standpoint, if you're looking at like fixed wireless access providers in rural areas, the higher the power, the greater the propagation, the more coverage you're going to get for every dollar of capital you put on the tower. And so it seems to us that should be revisited as well. So
higher power for CBRS, free 12 gigahertz, and the 5G future becomes much better.
Yes, it's really just putting spectrum to use, and if you can do it more economically at different power levels, that should be looked at.
And I've asked this of all of our panelists, I know that we have parts of the DISH team here as you look to engage with partners, do business with our member companies. Any word to the audience of the best way to engage with DISH, to seek out partnerships with DISH as y'all build out a new 5G network, try to go into new applications and new markets in new ways? What would your advice be to those who want to engage with DISH?
Well, we generally issue RFPs for everything we do, and as I said, in the coming years, once we bring our headlights up a little bit and look beyond next June, we'll be looking to expand geographically quite a bit, and so there will be opportunities for much more regional fiber. I think generally the software pieces of the stack are pretty well locked down, but again, as I said, because of the design of being Open RAN, we can mix and match vendors and pull, different components in and out and just reintegrate. So, let us know what you're up to and whether you see a fit, and we're all ears.
Before we close out, anything else that you want to leave the audience with as DISH was a pioneer in the satellite industry and bringing competition into the video market. I don't know when T-Mobile and Sprint began its merger process, if you thought at the end of that day that you would end up being the remedy to bring competition to the wireless market. And as our country embarks on a historic commitment of broadband infrastructure funding that at levels we've never done before.
Yep.
So where does DISH fit into that story?
Well, we led the opposition to the Sprint T-Mobile merger at the time, and so no, I didn't know we were going to be brought in at the 11th hour as a remedy, but we signed up for it. We already had at that time over 100 megahertz of spectrum. Since then, we've bought 5,000 CBRS licenses and $7 billion worth of 345 to 355, which we felt if we were going to be in the business, you had to preserve your long-term competitive spectrum position. So we couldn't let that opportunity pass. So I think we will be bringing disruptive pricing to the market. We don't want to necessarily, enter the market like Verizon or AT&T did 30 years ago. So you won't see a lot of Dish branded or Boost branded stores. We'll do much more through digital activations, and eSIM is certainly supportive of that. Where the process of going into a store, I think many people would rather have a root canal than go try and switch their phones and move everything off of one device to another. So we have to make that really easy from a digital experience standpoint. Yeah. And those are table stakes for the consumer market. And then, as I said, we're ramping up through partners as well as independently our entry into enterprise and commercial businesses, which includes government entities.
So, any questions before we finish? This is a shy crowd, at least in the last. Any questions for Tom?
Must have been a heck of a happy hour last night.
Yeah. It was a good night. We'll have another good night tonight. But I would love to have any questions. If not, I'm proud that, again, as we kind of kicked off today, and as we look at CommTel to encompass our transformation, and having companies like Zayo, Crown Castle, DISH, and you could go on and on, region by region, the new entrants, the new builders, the new technologies, but all with the common mission of bringing both new technologies and new competition to benefit the country and the consumer and the communities that we all serve. I couldn't be prouder of the member companies that we have, the board that we have, and I really appreciate everything that DISH does to make our organization stronger and better.
We're happy to work with you, and we enjoy it. Thank you very much.